It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and you have plans to meet your friends at a cafe. You go ahead and start your car before a 20-minute drive to the cafe. Driving along the wide roads in your neighborhood, you wonder why all the houses are so spaced out. Next, you get caught in traffic, making you wonder why so many people are driving. The next day, you're annoyed with driving, so you try walking to brunch with your friends. The walk is unpleasant. The sidewalk begins and ends, has poles sticking through it, and you cross multiple large intersections and almost get hit by a car. You think to yourself, this is why so many people choose to drive. Why is this the only good option for commuting? Why is it so hard to commute without a car? There are clear reasons for this, and the answer lies in how the US has evolved to exclusively favor the automobile and the American suburb. I am Carson, and this is Driving Us Apart. After the Second World War, America began sprawling. Urban development rapidly pushed outwards because of one invention, the automobile. Cars allowed for cities to create entire neighborhoods away from school, work, and other locations. These spread out suburban neighborhoods gave birth to the modern infrastructure design we see in many places today. During this post-war era, car-centric development was given priority. Soon, highways and parking lots would be in the American layout. Pedestrians and transit users saw more difficult commutes because of this, causing many of those who didn't already drive to buy cars, which, of course, the car companies loved.
Walking to school elementary education was probably about a 30-minute walk, but high school was about a 10-minute walk. All kinds of weather, and we didn't have school buses, so you either walked to school or your parents took you to school, or you could ride the city bus. And I rode the city bus home from school every once in a while.
What year range was this around?
It would have been like in the 50s and 60s, probably mostly 50s and some of the 60s.
This is Charlene, who was born after World War II and lived through the rapid suburbanization of America. I also asked her, what made her drive later on in life? What made her switch from walking to driving?
I worked on the summers, and I drove to work because it was about 10 miles from my house to work, and that was just too far to walk. And the bus didn't go in a direction there, a straight bus, so it was taking a car. And by that time, my parents had two cars, so my dad took one to work and I took one to work.
But what about those who don't have the affordance of driving? Walks could be excruciatingly long in many areas of the U.S. Single-use zoning laws, which strictly dictate that houses and neighborhoods should be away from commercial areas, make these treks undesirable. The U.S. applies these laws to almost all suburban areas. Even more, laws often require a minimum parking requirement, causing wide, ugly patches of black concrete to sprout up and make the distance from you to a business longer. Additionally, density regulations in neighborhoods are commonplace and require that houses be given minimum distance from each other, forcing roads to be longer. With all this in mind, who would ever want to walk to work, school, or a cafe with their friends? It is unfortunate that some have no choice. To illustrate how hostile the roads are for those who don't drive, conjure an image I am sure you can relate to. Picture that one big arterial road from your hometown. It's always backed up in traffic and has the most lanes out of all the roads. It is filled with strip malls and shopping centers with bright colored signs and logos you see every day. It stinks of fast food, it's unattractive, it's always busy. It is not a place you want to end up at. You just have to drive through it on your commute. This is called a stroad, which is a failed mix between a street and a road. Jason Slaughter, a YouTube commentator, discusses this phenomenon in one of his videos on his channel, Not Just Bikes.
Stroads are hostile to people outside of a car. There are lots of motor vehicles and speeds are high, so walking or cycling feels uncomfortable and dangerous. There are long distances between places, and there are often large parking lots that need to be crossed before getting anywhere. And it's basically impossible to cross the stroad except by walking to a traffic signal and waiting. The signs are large and meant to be read while driving, which feels really out of scale if you're walking there. And often trees have been removed from the clear zone, making the environment even more uninviting if you're not in a car. Somehow, though, painted bicycle gutters are still okay in the clear zone. Traffic engineers are concerned about drivers hitting a tree. Hitting a cyclist is expected. This is clearly a place for cars, so it's unsurprising that pretty much everyone drives here.
Besides making the cities hostile for pedestrians, these unwalkable city layouts that we so often see in America have other negative impacts on society as a whole. Let's go back to the situation earlier where you imagine yourself going to a cafe with your friends. Having that social connection is great, but remember how hard it is to get there in the first place. And we have a layout in which we need to sit in metal boxes with AC for 15 minutes before and after socializing. This means that we are socializing a lot less overall since we have to set out chunks of our time for this inconvenient transportation. There's actual data and studies highlighting the lack of social connection and community in car-centric countries like the US. Environments like sprawled suburbs and busy arterial roads are suggested to cause a social divide and barrier preventing human interaction. This is known as community severance. This community severance can be seen as a result of the advent of car-centric infrastructure. And a study shows that scary roads with high traffic and high speeds reduce physical activity, children's contact and development, access to goods and services, and social connection overall. Imagine we had walkable and more accessible cities where the car is not at the top of the hierarchy. Imagine how much more we could see our friends, or even talk to strangers and make more friends. I want you to think about this issue. Some of you might not mind this too much. On the other hand, some of you might be upset or saddened. It is very upsetting to think about this infrastructure that we cultivated to make ourselves more divided. I think it would be good if we got more involved in municipal policy for this issue, as it is the closest government to us. You can join groups and clubs where you can discuss this issue with others. There are plenty of articles, YouTube videos, and other podcasts that discuss this topic, if you are interested. At the very least, I hope you all can understand that access to social connections is important and strive to maintain your communities. Here's one thing that I believe would be very enlightening. Take a day to get around without using your car. Walk somewhere, take the city bus, maybe bike, and just observe and acknowledge the architecture and design of your city that makes this day harder for you. It can be very eye-opening actually living a life without car dependency and noticing how hard the US makes it. Anyways, I appreciate you listening to Driving Us Apart. My name is Carson, and until next time.